You're listening to Storytime in Paris on Paris Underground Radio. For more great content and to join our book club, please join us on Patreon. Since well before Victor Hugo looked up at Notre Dame and thought, what if a hunchback lived in there? Authors have been inspired by Paris. Welcome to the Storytime in Paris podcast on Paris Underground Radio, where we keep that tradition alive by showcasing an author with a French connection in each episode. Every episode will feature 5 questions asked by you, our author's biggest fans, and answered live on air. Then our authors will treat us to a reading of an excerpt from their book. I'm your host, Jennifer Garrity. Would you like to join the Storytime in Paris book club? Head on over to patreon.com/Paris Underground Radio and stay tuned to the end of this episode for more information. My guest this week is author and podcast host Sutanya Dacres. Sutanya's podcast, Dinner for One, has been featured in the New York Times and the BBC Radio Hour, and she has just released her first book, Dinner for One: How Cooking in Paris Saved Me. In 2009, Sutanya met a charming French man. We've all been there. She fell in love, and after a couple of long-distance years, she followed him from her native New York to Paris, where she married him and they lived happily ever after. Only, of course, that last bit didn't happen. Sutanya's memoir, Dinner for One: How Cooking in Paris Saved Me, is no fairy tale. It's no cliche either. Instead, it's an honest look into what happened when Sutanya's world fell apart and she found herself alone, divorced, in her 30s, in a foreign land. Through her generous, open, and insightful writing, we feel her fall in love, we hear her heart break, and we watch her pick herself up and start again. And what's that? That's the scent of culinary salvation. Please allow me to introduce Sutanya Dacres, author of Dinner for One: How Cooking in Paris Saved Me. Welcome, Sutanya. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, for inviting me on the show. I'm very excited.
So, can you start by telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay, so my name is Sutanya Dacres, originally from New York City, the Bronx specifically. I've been living in Paris for 9 years. I am technically a writer, mostly a ding-dong, but the writing works out for me. And I am publishing my first book, which is a memoir, on Tuesday the 21st. I guess by the time this is out in the world, the book will be out in the world. And the memoir is called Dinner for One: How Cooking in Paris Saved Me. And it is essentially about how I used cooking and the power of solo dining and cooking for myself as a way to heal from a very unexpected divorce. So that's why I'm in Paris, because I met a French man and fell in love with him and moved to Paris. Et voilà.
Yeah, normally I ask what people's connection to France or to Paris is, but your entire book is about that. So was Paris a place that you had always wanted to be?
Not really. And funny story, I actually studied French in high school and university. And I, usually, at least in American universities, you have an option to study abroad, right? And it would make sense that I would study abroad in France. I was like, oh no, I'm going to go to Australia. So I studied French because I enjoyed the language, but I don't know. I just never really saw myself living here. I wasn't a Francophile. I wasn't someone that dreamt about living in France. I just came here, aside from my ex-husband. I always just felt really comfortable here. I really liked it. Even when I was just visiting before we got married, I was just like, oh, this is cool. And then once we broke up, I was just like, okay, well, let's see if I can make it work. And I did. But yeah, I'm not one of those people that was like, oh my God, and I had an Eiffel Tower in my room since I was 12 years old. Like, no, not at all.
Yeah. It was the same for me. I also studied French in high school and in college, but I had no intention of ever living here.
Yeah.
It was not on my radar. And,
Yeah.
Now it's been 12 years.
Yes, right? It's wild how that happens.
Yeah, it's true. But I felt the same way. I felt like I was walking around in a big hug. Like this was just my place.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So I have collected some questions for you.
Oh my God.
Are you ready?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
So there is a real vulnerability in your writing and in how much of yourself you share. You don't shy away from some real serious topics. Was there ever any hesitation for you about this? And how have the people closest to you responded?
Was there hesitation? Yes and no. I mean, the decision to put yourself out there in the world the way that I did is not one that should be taken lightly. And I actually, yeah, part of me, I didn't realize that until I actually finished the book, and I was like, oh man, I got deep here. But I think one of the good things that comes from being so vulnerable, as Brene Brown says, is that there's so much power in that, right? There's so much strength in like just bearing yourself raw and being like, I'm a human being, and I go through ups and downs, highs and lows. I make bad decisions. I make good decisions. I make questionable decisions, but that doesn't take away from my soul and the goodness of who I am and the fact that I have value and I'm worthy of love and care and affection. So it was difficult, but in my case at least very necessary. And how my friends have reacted to it. A lot of my friends, it's so funny because a lot of my friends close friends that I have now met me post divorce or as my marriage was ending, so they don't know me as a married woman. And it's really interesting. They've told me it's really interesting for them to know that part of me and that side of me. And yeah, I've been getting really good feedback. They're really impressed and really happy for me, and just hope that I continue to write books and stuff like that. So,
Yeah. I mean, you talk about some actions that you take that maybe people wouldn't necessarily want to put out there.
like what?
And you also, well, like, you're trying to lose yourself in drinking and things like
Oh
that,
yeah,
in
yeah,
other
yeah.
words, maybe people would not want other people to know that about themselves, for example. But also you go really deep into how much you loved your ex-husband. And I think both of those things take a lot of strength just to put it out there.
I guess so. I mean, but the thing is, I mean, I did love him. I mean, I
Yeah.
changed my entire life for him. I needed to, in terms of like the American in Paris kind of like expat genre, I didn't want it to, I wanted to make sure that when people read my story, it was rooted in something real and powerful, right? My love for my ex-husband was so real. The love we have for each other was so real and so true and so pure. And, in some ways that was the hardest bit to write, and not the drinking and the partying and all that stuff, because it was so real and so pure and so raw, and the fact that neither of us had any idea what was to come next you know and it's also, I think I can say that my ex-husband was my very first love. And once you love like that, you love that hard, you'll never get the opportunity to love like that ever again. And that's like, it's such an innocent, pure way of feeling about someone, and such a strong way of feeling about someone. And it's, I don't know, sometimes I mourn the fact that I'm a jaded old divorcee now. And I'll never feel that way again. But yeah, I think back to the question. Yeah, I wanted my story, and when people read it, yeah, to be rooted in honesty and power. And I think the only way to accomplish that is by being honest and being truthful. And the drinking bit, I mean, I went down a bad path, but I don't know. It's also, Shabba, I'm not ashamed. That's my life. It happened. I think that's also it. I'm not ashamed of anything that has happened. I'm embarrassed. you know, I'm sometimes I regret. I'm like, damn, shouldn't have done that. But I'm not ashamed, because everything that has happened will happen to me. It's just going to make me a stronger, better person, hopefully.
Do you know, is your ex-husband aware of this book? Are you still in touch with him?
Yeah. I mean, the ex-husband, he's listened to the podcast, and I actually, because I used some of our emails and text messages in the book, I had to ask him for his permission. And so he's read bits and pieces. He hasn't read the entire thing yet, but he's really proud of me, and he's really happy for me. So,
Fabulous.
yeah, no bad blood between us.
You talk in the book, there are a lot of cultural differences that you examine between Americans and French, or maybe like New Yorkers and Parisians. I think as expats, that's something that we naturally do.
Yeah.
I know I've spent a lot of time thinking about these differences, but you actually had an observation that I had never thought of,
Ooh.
which is that French people are comfortable taking up space, that they are more self-assured. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe what we Americans can learn from that?
Yeah, and again, that was a huge generalization. It's Parisians that I've met that I see. I'm sure someone will write in and be like, "That's not true because my friend Clementine." So we're not talking about your girl Clementine. We're just talking about my observations. I don't know, when I moved here, and I don't know if maybe it's because I was really young. Not really, but younger. Maybe it's because I was coming into my womanhood, but I was just so impressed by these Parisian women and how they were just themselves, right? They weren't ashamed to talk about sex. They weren't ashamed to talk about their relationships and what was going on. They weren't ashamed to talk about their faiblesse, weaknesses. Yeah, weaknesses. They were okay with being themselves, just in general. And I found that as well with, the French men that I knew, which were mostly my ex-husband's friends. Yeah, I just found them to be okay, for the most part, okay with themselves in a way. And these were women that were around my age, right? In a way that I hadn't really experienced in New York. And, the longer I've been here, I think it comes through in the language as well, like in this idea of like advocating to yourself and the fact that you have rights and power and all that stuff within, as a just a person living in this world. Because my French friends that have kids obviously speak French, and I love this. There are two things that French kids say that, obviously, like all French speaking people say, but to hear it coming from a child's mouth, I'm like, it is setting them up for a life of advocating for themselves and accepting and expecting pleasure in their life, and being sure of themselves. The first one is tu n'as pas le droit, like you don't have the right, like you don't have the right to do that to me or to say that to me or to. I love it. And also j'ai pas envie, like I don't have any desire to do it. It's not like I don't want, no, je peux pas, like I can't. It's like I don't have a desire to do that. That thing is not going to bring me joy. That thing is not going to make me happy or bring me pleasure, so I'm not doing it. And I think, when you speak like that, when you have that way of thinking, it just continues to grow with you and to shape who you are. And I also found, especially like around my divorce and stuff, I do find shame sometimes to be a useful emotion just because it keeps you in check, right? When you're shameless, you just run amok and it's a bad thing. But so that said, I found within my circle of French friends and my Parisian women, they're not ashamed of their humanity, right? They're not ashamed of not being perfect. They're not ashamed of sometimes making mistakes. And I've learned a lot from having that kind of stance. Like, this is who I am as a person. Like, I'm not perfect. I'm not a bad person. It's like, take it or leave it.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's really interesting because we think of ourselves in the US as being free and free to be who we are, to self-advocate, but there's also a sense of like not wanting to take up too much space and having to be polite and having, especially as a woman, to kind of like downplay yourself a bit so that you're not taking up the space that someone else would want. Whereas I do find that the French are much clearer in saying, like, this is where I am. I'm not perfect. Take me or leave me.
Uh-huh. I agree.
So you talk a lot in your book about dating since your divorce.
Oh, God. No, I don't want. No, don't make me.
Curious about what's going on in Paris right now? My second podcast, Don't Miss This, takes you beyond the typical and the obvious with a weekly roundup of the best of what's happening in Paris each week. Never wonder what you're missing out on again. Listen now to Don't Miss This on ParisUndergroundRadio.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be right back with Storytime in Paris after a word from our sponsors. And now, back to Storytime in Paris. In the US, even though it's changed or is changing, there's still the stigma around divorce. Do you find that there is a different view of it here, or there's a different view of being a divorced woman in France?
Um, Honestly, no. Honestly, when I was really hitting them streets a couple of years ago, no, I think people were just kind of more curious about why I stayed and like what kind of person like marries a French man, moves to Paris, gets divorced, and stays here. You know.
Mm.
So I think the guys that I dated back then, they were more curious about just me as a person because of the decision I made. And I don't find that there's a huge stigma here around divorce. If anything, they're kind of like, "Woo, get to start all over again. You get a second chance. But yeah, no, I didn't find that there was anything, there was any kind of like negative connotation tied to the fact that I was, or any negativity rather tied to the fact that I was a divorced lady.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be such a like a quote unquote failure here.
Yeah, no, not at all. I think it's for a long time I personally felt like a failure, but that wasn't coming from society. It was, the narrative that I was telling myself. But from society, no. Like, French people like being so blasé. One of my friends was like, "C'est pas la pire chose qui peut t'arriver, hein?" I'm like, "Thanks." And I'm like bawling. I know it's not the worst thing that could ever happen to me, but like I'm sad.
Were you encouraged to downplay your emotions?
No, not at all. It's so funny because, like, my friend, she was saying that to me, just to help me, like, relativiser un peu. But she wasn't telling me to stop crying, It was just kind of like, come on, like, you have a nice apartment, you have a job. But, what I found interesting was my American friends were very much like, you should do yoga. You should, get yourself together, like, pick yourself
Mm.
back up, blah, blah, blah. Like, 3 weeks after my ex walked out on me. Whereas my French friends were like, here's all the rosé. You want to cry, cry. You want to talk, talk. So I found that my French friends allowed me to sit with these emotions, no matter how all over the place they were, no matter how sad. Whereas my American friends were like, we need to fix you. You need to fix you. You need to get better. I found that difference. I found that really, really interesting, the difference between how they both approach it. And also, what's funny? You mentioned that. I don't think I wrote it in the book, and god damn it, I wish I'd realized this. This is a good insight. French people, Parisians, are so much they're much more okay with heavy emotions and like quote unquote bad emotions. They're okay with anger, they're okay with sadness, they're okay with depression, they're okay with emotions that I think as Americans, if we feel this way, we would want to hide it. We'd want to fix it. We'd want to not, the only thing we can feel is happiness, you know? Whereas I found that, yeah, my French friends and Parisian friends rather are okay with being sad, are okay with their friends being sad or not in a good place. There's not this immediate rush to fix themselves or the people around them. Let them just be humans.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, just how frequently they talk about having a burnout
Yeah.
and how you can just go to the doctor and say, like, hey, I'm sad, I'm depressed, and the doctor will write you a note so you don't have to go to work for a while. That's even if that were something that could happen in the US, you would feel quite guilty about it. You would feel like there was something wrong with you.
Oh my God, 100%. 100%. Or like when you ask a French person, or in my case, at least when I ask my friends, like, comment ça va? Est-ce que tu vas bien? I feel like in America, unless you were like super close, and even if you were super close, they wouldn't want to like burden you with their emotions or what's going on in their life. An American friend would be like, I'm good. Like, yeah, everything's great. And a French friend's like, oh, ça va? Like, tu vas bien? Like, bof. It's like, okay, what's going on? And they talk.
It's true. And then it gives you permission to do the same.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, speaking of these cultural differences, you've lived here now for nearly a decade.
Yeah, my God.
I know. What surprises you most when you go back to the US?
Everything in plastic in the supermarkets.
Mm.
Isn't that weird? Like, why is everything in plastic? This apple does not need to be in plastic.
Doesn't need to be individually wrapped.
Right? And the amount of like pre-cut, like, okay, you have a few pre-cut stuff at Monoprix, my supermarket of choice, even though it's super expensive. God, I went there today and bought some stuff, 30 euros. I don't even know what I bought. Anyway, sorry. So the things being wrapped in plastic and all the amount of like pre-sliced, like everything is pre-sliced or pre-sliced garlic. Like, really? you know, like you can't just slice your own garlic. That surprises me. What else? Okay, so and I don't know if this is like a post-COVID, post-George Floyd racial reckoning that's happening in the U.S., post-Trump, post everything. When I went home last summer, there was so much tension, right? And I felt like a what's the word I'm looking for?
Powder keg?
Yeah, powder keg. Yeah, that's a red at any point, just like.
You mean like racially charged?
Not racially, just everything. It's so expensive. And again, this is from New York City. I don't know what's like the other parts of the country, but it's so expensive. People are so stressed. There's so much tension between different people, tension between the cops and the people they're supposed to be protecting when they're not actually protecting. And I just know, I just felt like, yeah, there was so much tension in the air. And I wonder if it's going to be the same when I head home this summer as well. What else shocks me? Uh, the fact that everybody is such in such a rush. Like, can we just chill?
Yeah.
Like, can we just like, like, yeah, we've been at this restaurant for 2 hours, but you have something else to do? Like, let's just chill. Yeah, the fact that everyone's in a rush, and what else?
I mean, that's one for sure that's for me because I remember like booking every part of my day. Like you could have a lunch thing, a coffee thing, a drinks thing, a dinner thing, and then an after dinner thing, all with different people.
Yeah, totally, totally. I should have called out about that when I first moved here by some French girlfriends. They were like, "Why? Why do you always have something planned after? Like, why can't you just hang out with us?" And it's just like, "Oh, I never really. Huh? Okay, cool. I didn't really think about that, but thanks for pointing that out." One thing that I don't know if it's not. It's what people my friends say about me when I go back. They're like, "You dress different." Apparently, I'm very much dressed like a Parisian now in my own
Mm.
way, I guess. Like with like my button down white shirts and like dainty jewelries and espadrilles and like denim skirts, mini skirts and stuff. I don't know. But I find that interesting. Every time I go home, they're like, you're dressed differently.
That happens to me too. My mom is always like, it's just casual. We can just be casual. And I'm like, a dress for me is
Yeah,
casual.
this
That's
is
what
so
this is.
cash.
Yeah, I don't have less casual than this.
Yeah, I'm literally wearing a sundress. Cash.
Exactly. It's one really easy piece of fabric. There's what's more casual than that. It's interesting what you say about the tension too. Do you find are you afraid at all when you go back home?
Oh yeah. I mean, last time I went home, I rarely took the subway, like the regular subway. I would either take the Metro North or the express bus into the city. And I just feel like way more on edge. And especially, from watching the news and reading the news and all that from here, you hear about all these stabbings and these random like stabbings and shootings and all this stuff. It's like God, I just I feel like I need to protect I need to be aware at all times. There is no just like sense of like yeah relaxing unless I'm in someone's apartment or at my mom's house or somewhere enclosed. Like I just don't feel that unfortunately like safe just like being out and about in the city anymore, unfortunately.
No, I was just going to say I think that surprises Americans to hear that because I feel the same way. I feel like there could be a threat coming from absolutely anywhere, and there doesn't have to be a cause for it. It could just happen.
Whereas in Paris, like I mean, I feel knock on wood, jusqu'à ici, I feel so safe here, like so safe, like walking around at night. Like, of course, you have like dodgy neighborhoods and like sketchy bits of Paris, but I don't go there, obviously. But just walking around my beloved 18 and like 9 and the Marais and like, I feel totally safe.
Yeah. So, if someone were coming to Paris for the very first time and their first stop was your home, what would you cook them for dinner?
Oh, that's a good one. Are they coming in winter or
Oh, that's a good question. It's up to you.
spring or fall or?
Dealer's choice.
Well, I love summertime. Summer Sue, hashtag Summer Sue. It's me. It's when I shine. And you live here, so the fact that it stays bright, and it's like 10 p.m. You know what I mean? Like lovely.
Amazing.
So I would definitely do. It would be more like kind of like an apéro dînatoire, just because it's hot and you don't want anything too heavy. So I'd probably do you know Delia Smith? She's a British cook. She's like the British like Ina Garten.
Mm-hmm.
She does this amazing like cilantro, caper, lime sauce and she drizzles it over halloumi. It is incredible. So I'd probably do that. And then I also this recipe is actually in the book. It's I do like a burrata topped with pan fried. What's noix? Is that walnuts? No, not walnuts. It's the other nut, the round one.
Hazelnuts.
Yes, hazelnuts. Merci. Voilà. I do pan fried hazelnuts in like olive oil. Put that over the burrata, and then like with tomatoes and stuff, it's absolutely lovely. So yeah, a apéro du noir like that. Have some charcuterie with wrapped in cantaloupe.
Mm.
Yeah, I do love a good cucumber feta salad with like nice red onions. I do love a bean salad with lots of parsley and garlic and things like that. So it'll just be like a little spread where we're just like munching and noshing and like yeah. I do some like grilled shrimp. I have a stovetop grill. So I do like a little grilled shrimp situation. Yeah, it'd just be like lots of like small little bits and bobs. I love a good bits and bobs situation.
That sounds very refreshing.
And of course, like lots of rosé, lots of natural wine, lots of like crisp, minerally natural wine, white wine. That's what I love.
Mm. So, on the flip side of that, if you were introducing a French person to Jamaican cuisine, what's the
Ooh,
first thing you would cook them?
oh my, that's a good question. Definitely fried dumplings, which I love. It's kind of like a beignet, but it's not sweet. Like our dumplings have nothing inside of them, right? It's just like dough. So yeah, it's kind of like a beignet, but it's not sweet. Definitely fried dumplings, plantains, and I probably, well, if it was breakfast, I would do ackee and saltfish, which is like the national dish of Jamaica, and it's a fruit essentially that's picked off of a tree. It looks kind of like scrambled eggs, but it's not. And we make that with codfish, so it's like super savory and spicy. And it's absolutely delicious. And then if it was like an afternoon thing, I'd probably do jerk chicken. It's like a very spicy blend marinade that we use on chicken, and it's best when it's barbecued on a grill, but you can make it in the oven with rice and peas. And the way we cook rice and peas is absolutely incredible. It's, so white rice, obviously, and kidney beans cooked in a mix of coconut milk and water and with scallions and scotch bonnet peppers and garlic. So it's like super flavorful, and thyme. So it's super flavorful and like, yeah, it has a depth of flavor that I love. So yeah, I'll do that. And also we drink a lot of fresh juices in Jamaica. So like growing up, fresh carrot juice, fresh pineapple juice, you go outside, if you have a lot of people in Jamaica actually like have gardens and stuff. So and like fruit trees and stuff. So you go and like, grab a carrot or like grab a mango or whatever and like make a fresh juice. So like, yeah, I'd also do that as well if I had access to a garden.
That sounds amazing. You've made me very, very hungry.
Someone needs to open a Jamaican restaurant in Paris. I am convinced that French people would go crazy for Jamaican food. My ex-husband, like I think one of the reasons why he stayed with me as long as he actually did was because he had access to Jamaican food. I mean, it is so good that because the influences, right? So Jamaica for a long time was a British territory. Prior to that, I mean, the black people that are in Jamaica now are not there because we wanted to. It wasn't like a willing migration, right?
Right, right.
They are the descendants of people that were trafficked from Africa, from the enslaved people. So we brought that with us, right? The way of cooking, the spices, all of that. And then we had, for a while, Jamaica was under Spanish rule. So we have influences from that. For a while, Jamaica was actually under French rule for a very short period of time, but we had influences from that. And then the British, the fact that we were a British colony for decades, we have hundreds of years, actually, centuries, actually. You have that influence, but then even on top of that, once slavery was abolished in Jamaica, they needed labor, right? So there was a lot of indentured servitude with a lot of Indian people came over. They have Chinese people that came over, and so that made its way into our cuisine as well. So it's a very interesting, yeah, cuisine that's full of history and different flavors and depth, and it is just like absolutely incredible. So funny. I remember once a couple years ago, I had a bunch of colleagues over for dinner because I love hosting people. I love having people over. One of my colleagues is from China, from mainland China. That's where she's from. And I think I'd made like chicken or something and like rice. And she took a bite of the chicken and she was like, "My mom makes chicken just like this." And I was like, "My mom makes chicken just like this." And it was just the fact that I used ginger and like all this stuff, and cooked it the way my mom cooked it. And that's probably somehow from the Chinese influence that came to Jamaica. And like, I don't know. So yeah, I found that really interesting.
That is really interesting. But I mean, we're only just now in 2022 starting to get like Mexican food here. So Jamaican food might be a few years off.
I know, but someone please do it because I'm tired of spending money on the Eurostar going to London.
Are you searching for spiritual guidance? The Heart of You podcast is an exploration into your soul through intuition, spirituality, divination, and unconditional love. Host Annette Lou is a spiritual guidance coach, intuitive, Akashic, and tarot reader who discusses practical ways to integrate spiritual growth into your everyday life. Listen now to The Heart of You on ParisUndergroundRadio.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be right back with Storytime in Paris after a word from our sponsors. And now, back to Storytime in Paris. All right, I have a bonus question for you.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Here we go. If a young 20-something came
Yeah.
to you
Mm-hmm.
and she told you that she'd fallen in love transatlantically with a Frenchman, what advice would you give her?
Run for the hills. Run and don't look back. Block him. Block on every social, everyone's. No. I'm joking. You know what? Because I have friends that met, French partners, whether abroad or even just like living here. And they're still very much in love. Not to say that their relationships don't have conflicts, ups and downs, like any normal relationship, but they're very much in love. Their husbands are lovely, and their relationships are fine. So I'm not going to say it's not going to work out. The only thing I would say is like live it and enjoy it. But if it comes to an end, that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that your life is over. It doesn't mean that you did anything bad. It doesn't mean that you're a failure. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you're not deserving of love and the most beautiful form of devotion and care and admiration. It doesn't mean any of that. All it means is that this part of your life is over and you're ready to start a new journey. That's all it means. So I'd say, you know what? If you love little Louis, if you are just obsessed with Guillaume, knock yourself out. Enjoy it. Because the one thing about Frenchmen is that when they're in love, they know how to love. You know what I mean? You will feel like the Naomi Campbell, Halle Berry, Cindy Crawford of his world. And every woman deserves that. Every person deserves that. So just, if I'm at a young 20 something, I'd say, girl, enjoy the ride while it lasts. It may last for 50 years. It may last for 5 years. It may last for 5 minutes. But enjoy it, live it up. If it comes to an end, don't obviously, be reflective on the role that you played in the demise of your relationship, because no one's perfect. When you have two people together, it takes two to tango, you know what I mean? So yeah, be self-reflective and like what on the things you'd probably do differently and better, in the next relationship. But don't be too hard on yourself. And yeah, just, think that this is a stepping stone for something else. Maybe if you get the opportunity to love again, and you love differently and better, because you learn so much from your past experience. So that's what I'd say.
That's great advice. On that note,
I should take my own advice.
yeah, it's hard though.
Yeah, it's tough, especially the older you get. As you were saying earlier, it's just like my life is so good as it is now. It's like, do I want like deja? I don't really like having men in my apartment. Like, I don't want their testosterone. Like my vibe, this feminine wonderland that I've created for myself. And yeah, I've just become so used to me, right? I think one of the great things about the podcast and the book for me is I fell in love with me, which I don't think I didn't realize how much I needed to before. And the fact that I've done that now, it's like, if you're not going to enhance my life, that it's already great, like make it better. If you're not going to bring something exceptional to the table, like, why are you here? you know?
Yeah.
Like, both of us should be at a level where we're giving each other immense pleasure outside of like, sex, whatever, just like on an everyday basis, just like, yeah, giving each other pleasure and joy. And if you're just coming to stress me out, like, no merci.
So I think you're going to treat us to a reading from your book.
Yes, I am. I'll save the heavy bits for when, hopefully everyone that listens to this episode buys the book. For when you're like in the privacy of your own home and I'm like bearing my soul. I'll leave that for you to enjoy privately. So I host these supper clubs, right, for single women in Paris. And the idea is that I feel like if you're a single woman of a certain age and you're hanging out with you hang out with your friends, like more and more it becomes like married people or people in serious relationships. And the topic of conversation is always like your status, like your relationship status. It's like, guys, we're more than just, single. We have fabulous lives. And so I decided to start the supper club, just single women. So it's like only us. Well, it's really like single people, but I have mostly female friends or a lot of female women in my circle. So yeah, the idea was just to have a dinner space, a nighttime space that was just for single people. Come to my place, I cook dinner, we, eat, drink, be merry, feast on our fabulous lives, etc. And a few times I've had a little bit too much to drink, and because I'm having such a good time, that I'm like, oh my God, you guys want to hear a bit of my book? And they're like, sure, Sutanya. So I will read the bit that I'll read the bit to you that I've read in the supper club. So this is Dinner for One: How Cooking in Paris Saved Me, chapter 19, the next episode. The relationship that I have with Paris is complicated. Sometimes I love it, like in the summertime, and sometimes I can't stand it. There are times when I curse the fact that I'm still here and wonder why I'm torturing myself. Is being so far away from my family and friends worth the sacrifice? It's the most frustratingly bizarre place that you don't ever want to leave. I won't make any big declarations about the future. I don't know what it holds or where it will take me, but Paris will always have a special place in my heart. I wouldn't want to have experienced these chapters of my life anywhere else, and I owe Paris more than I could ever pay her back in return. Cooking Dinner for One in Paris played a crucial role in shaping my womanhood in more ways than I could have ever imagined. In the span of 6.5 years, from the end of 2009 to 2016, I met my future ex-husband, embarked on a 3-year transatlantic relationship, got married, moved to Paris, experienced a breakdown of a marriage, and went through a divorce. Stayed in Paris and embarked on the journey of rebuilding my life. My journey has shifted and changed gears more than I ever wanted it to, but I'm grateful that I lived and experienced it with the city of light as my beacon. Living alone in Paris forced me to confront myself and sit with my uncomfortable feelings in ways that I doubt I would have if I'd returned to New York City after my marriage ended. I imagine that my family would have coddled me, and as a consequence, I would have felt pressure to fix myself by quickly getting into another serious relationship. The significance of my marriage and experience in Paris would have been treated as a small parenthesis in my life, its weight and importance only acknowledged through whispers with undertones of embarrassment and shame. Paris forced me to be still and to think, pushing me to create my own sense of self and future. Her beauty gave me hope, and her melancholy showed me that it was not only okay, but also courageous to embrace my emotions, no matter how manic, no matter how unsettling they were. Paris is not an easy place to live, and you have to work for it. But when she shines on you, you feel appreciated, flaws and all. It's almost like the city's on your side and you feel special. I was allowed to be messy and come to terms with the unexpected tectonic shift that happened in my life without fear of judgment. It's a culture that sees beauty in what would be considered flaws in the United States. Here, my flaws, my complexity, my humanity are what make me beautiful. I'm no longer afraid to confront the depth of my emotions, needs, and desires. Now, I'll have a completely different story to tell any future daughters and granddaughters I may have. I'll tell them that although I love purely, wholeheartedly, and unabashedly, it wasn't enough to withstand the waves and crashes of my marriage to TFM. There are no broken pieces of any one person to be put together with the crazy glue of love. I am and will remain a deeply flawed human being. I simply saw light in someone else and walked toward it with hope. Although my love story didn't continue as I expected it to, through the agony of divorce and finding peace through cooking for one, I learned the true meaning of caring for myself. I blossomed into a flower in Paris and finally found home within myself. Et voilà.
Perfect. That was a great choice. So, what's next for you? Do you have another book in the works?
No. I mean, mentally. Mentally, it's in the works. Has anything been done? No. But I would love to continue writing. I mean, I think it's something I've written like my entire careers. I've been in marketing, advertising, copywriting, all that stuff, brand voice strategy, brand messaging strategy, all that. So I've always been a storyteller and writer, but I guess I was always just too afraid and not confident enough to think that I could ever actually do it. So now that someone is giving me a platform, oh, you're going to hear from me.
Fabulous.
So yeah, I do plan on right. I have some other ideas that I'm just messing around with in my head. So we'll see. But in the immediate future, I have book stuff happening in Paris. I'm treating myself to a little vacances. A couple weeks after the book is out, I'm heading to New York. I'm going to be in DC. So I'll be booping and bopping for a little bit. Right now, I just want to enjoy this moment. Right. I want to enjoy the fact that I took a really traumatizing, heartbreaking situation and turned it into hard cold cash. So I am, I'm very much just looking forward to, enjoying this moment and super grateful and feeling super blessed that I have had the chance to tell my story. So yeah.
And where can people find you if they want to keep up to date with what's going on in your world?
You can find me on Dinner for One on Instagram. It's at dinner for dot and period one. And that's pretty much where you can find me. I go through like weird bursts of posting a lot and then like being silent for like 5 weeks and posting, then being, so don't expect any consistency. But yeah, that's where you can see what's goings on.
Great. Thank you so much. And I'll leave a little link in the show notes
Great.
so people can find you easily.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you. This was a pleasure.
Thank you again to Sutanya Dacres for such a lively conversation. You can find Sutanya on Instagram at dinner4.1. Please join me next week when my guest will be author Juliet Blackwell. Check back next week to see if your questions have been answered and to hear a reading from her book, The Paris Showroom. If you'd like to keep the conversation going, please join the Storytime in Paris book club, where you'll meet a different guest author each month and get to speak with them directly about their work. For more information, please visit patreon.com/Paris Underground Radio. I'm your host, Jennifer Garrity, and you can find me on all socials at Jennyphoria. That's JennyPhoria, and on my website, jennyphoria.com. Storytime in Paris is produced by me as part of the Paris Underground Radio podcast network. To check out interviews with previous guests or to discover more great Paris-based podcasts, please visit parisundergroundradio.com. Thank you, and until next time, happy reading! This episode of Storytime in Paris was produced by Jennifer Garrity for Paris Underground Radio. For more on this show and shows like it, please visit parisundergroundradio.com. Thank you again to Sutanya. Thank you again to Sutanya. Why can't I do it? Thank you again to Sutanya Dacres for such a lively conversation. You can find Sutanya on Instagram at dinner41. Please join me next week. You can find Sutanya on Instagram at dinner4.1.